On this episode of the Layover Live, Amir Muntasser stops by to talk about Google's upcoming Page Experience update. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 158 of the Layover Live, where we bring you the top article from the Layover each week. I'm Jason Swick, VP of Strategy and Insights, and welcome to this week's show. Happy to have you here. Well, the first major update to Google's algorithm for 2021 is on the horizon. However, it has now been pushed back to mid-June versus its original intended launch of May. So I wanted to make note of that. So this news comes by way of our article of the week this week, which comes from Search Engine Journal and talks about this change to the launch date, which, if anything, it gives site owners a little bit more time to prepare, which is always good. Now, it also appears that the role of the update and the impact it will have on search rankings won't really be fully reached until August, as Google is taking a more gradual approach with its rollout. And this is, pretty typical for this sort of thing. They usually don't go all in right out of the gate. They usually will kind of trickle things out just to make sure if there's any bumps along the way, they're able to address those. Now, Google also noted that websites should not expect any drastic changes when this update is eventually rolled out, as page experience is just one of many, many factors that are taken into consideration when ranking different pages. And we always make mention of that too. Google has a ton of different signals that go into their ranking algorithm. So this is just one of many. Now, as a reminder, this update has to do with Core Web Vitals, and Core Web Vitals are a set of really 3 individual metrics that are part of the upcoming page experience update. And we've already discussed these on the show a few times over this last year. Now, each metric indicates a separate but related aspect of user experience. And most recently, we had Tracy Legault on. I think this was during episode 146 in December, where she talked about some of the front end or more of the offensive work to get a perspective more from like an SEO analyst point of view as part of this update, as we knew it was coming since last May. Now, at SimpleView, as I talked about this offensive approach, we really approach SEO from both an offensive and defensive standpoint. Now, the offense is really this front end work that we talked about, and the defense is really more of the technical or the back end work. And it's really one of the many advantages of doing SEO with us, because we do both. Now, to bring in someone here to talk a little bit more about some of the more technical aspects or more of the defensive work, I have Amir Muntasser, who's our director of CMS Development here, to really join us. So, Amir, again, getting all of your technical expertise. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, super, super happy to have you. I think, again, as we look from a technical expert within the company, I think you're one of the best. And when we talk about this update, I think we're talking about, in large part, things like page speed and performance. So I kind of want to jump right into that with you, Amir, and really talk about, page speed and why maybe, this seems to matter all of a sudden. I know we talked about page speed for a while, but I wanted to kind of turn things over to you to talk a little bit about page speed and through the lens of more of a technical mind. So I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Yeah. When we talk about page speed, there's, it often gets summed up in the speed of my site, the performance, how am I doing on this? I've ran my website through PageSpeed Insights. I've got this score. There's this looming SEO change that's coming. And so it's hot on people's minds. And so that's kind of why we're talking about it a whole bunch. And really, it's this focus on web vitals. What are they? What do they mean? As you said, there's really just 3 that people kind of care about, or at least Google really cares about, and that's CLS, LCP, FID. And what does that mean? There's these acronyms being thrown around everywhere that it's confusing, and people want to know, rightfully.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. When you talk about these different terminologies, I mean, especially on the marketing side, right? We love acronyms. We throw them around all the time. But I think it's important for people to have more of a better understanding about what these things are. And I know Tracy touched on it from a high level too back in that previous episode. But let's talk a little bit more about this terminology. Maybe, around web vitals. We've heard about web vitals and page speed and performance, and they're 2 very different things. So maybe you could break down what exactly that we're talking about here, because I think it's important to differentiate, speed versus performance. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yes, often I find that people conflate speed and performance with each other, and that it's a very understandable like thing, but the reality is we do treat them as very different concepts. Technically, speed is a physical measurement. It's how fast is the content of your website downloading into the browser, right? And so there's a bunch of things that can impact that. There's your connection speed. Are you on, a 3G connection? You on LTE? You at home hooked up to a really fast broadband connection? The faster your connection is, the quicker it's going to be. And then there's also page size. The bigger the website, the more complicated and complex and stuff that it has in it, the longer it's going to take. So that's what we in the dev side really think about when we're talking about speed, is how do we shrink, because we can't control your connection. We can only shrink the size of the website. So that's what we think about. Performance, however, is this more experiential measurement, right? It has this site feel, right? And Web Vitals are an attempt on Google's behalf to try and both qualify and quantify an experience. And so the main ones, like I said, are CLS, LCP, and FID. What are those, right? CLS is cumulative layout shift. And what that really means is that's visual stability. And for that, I can't think of a better example than a thing that everyone has experienced, which is your website comes up, you see something you want to click, you go to click it, and then boom, an image loads in, shifts the content, and you've misclicked, and who knows where you are. Everyone has experienced that at some point multiple times. CLS, optimizing for CLS, prevents that. That's what we're talking about when we talk about cumulative layout shift, is how much is that happening? And really, this is the thing that people feel the most. Okay? They get upset because they're misclicking on things. It's not doing it they want. It's frustrating. It's annoying. People feel a bad CLS score. Interestingly, though this one kind of resonates the most with people, this is the least valuable score. When you look at a tool like Lighthouse or PageSpeed Insights, this only accounts for like 5% of the overall score. So it's, from an experiential standpoint, it's the most important, but from a score standpoint, it's kind of not, which is, I find personally very interesting. LCP, by contrast, is actually the most important in terms of score. It's something like 25%. LCP is largest contentful paint. And what that means is that's when meaningful content has loaded on the screen. When you see that big hero image, when you see that first primary paragraph of content loading in. And that one, interestingly, has a nice contrast to CLS, because CLS is least score, most felt. LCP is most score. And if you're doing your site right, least felt, because you can put in placeholder content, things to let people know that something is loading in the correct space, and progressively get the content in there, so that even if you are not fully optimized for LCP, no one really feels it, because they know where everything is going to be. They see the structure of the site coming in. And then the last one is FID, or first input delay, which is the gap time between when I tap or click something on the screen and I get any kind of response, whether it's an animation or a button opening a menu or whatever it is. It's when the site becomes interactive. And that's what we're talking about when we talk about performance. That's what we're measuring here. So it's two very different worlds. And these Web Vitals, they shift over time. They've kind of stabilized right now, but they've shifted quite a few times over the past couple of years as to what's deemed important.
Yeah, you make a good point. It has been sort of a moving goalpost, to your point. And thank you for breaking down that terminology, because I think it really helps to understand what the difference is between speed and performance, right? And you could argue that performance is really most of what matters, because that's what people want to. That's what they're feeling, right? And in terms of a web experience, so I think it's important. And thank you for breaking down those terms as it relates to Web Vitals around CLS and LCP and FID. Those are all important. But one thing you had mentioned there, you're talking about it as it relates to a score. which has to do with Google's tool or their PageSpeed Insights tool, which gets brought up from time to time, and their Insight tool, which is really a way to score how a web page is performing. So what do these scores really mean? And maybe you could explain further, how does Google use these scores in particular? Because I want to, make mention of that. I think it's important to understand that when we're building these scores, how it's done and what really matters. So talk about that maybe a little bit.
Sure. So PageSpeed Insights it's just that. It's insights. It is not direct guidance. It is a great generalist tool for quick spot checking of a site.
Okay.
Now, when I say it's a generalist tool, because it has to apply to everyone, it can not know about the underlying architecture, infrastructure, and demands of what it takes to build a website. Every website is architected different, whether you're on a WordPress, Drupal, our own CMS. It has to account for these variety of architectures that it can't know about. So when it provides insights, it's like, well, here's some things that you should probably check on. Okay, doesn't know whether or not you literally can in the platform that you are in, but good things to know. The next thing is that when it provides a score, it's providing a score based on what we call lab data.
Okay.
And this is a virtualized low-end device with a low-end connection that may not be representative of your actual site visitors, but it's just kind of a stand-in for the lowest common denominator that might be connecting to your site and seeing how your site performs on that scenario. As for how they're currently using it, presently they're not. Right now, it's just a tool that they are making available for people to quickly spot check and begin a conversation with their developers, or for developers to begin with their teams to kind of see, get some insights into where to start, because performance can be a very complicated thing, especially on the development side. So they're not actually used yet, but now it seems like in June is when the SEO update where they will be rolling in CLS and LZP and FID as factors for page experience. And those are going along with other things like HTTPS, safe browsing, mobile friendly, no intrusive interstitials, all those things that currently make up the page experience ranking factor. And like I said, as even Google said, likely not going to be a dramatic shift. And we won't really see the true effects until all the way in August. Because at the end of the day, relevance is still the primary ranking factor, right? So it's interesting what we're going to be seeing. So yeah, that's kind of the developer's perspective on PageSpeed Insights. Great tool, but it's not what we use and leverage as when we're looking at optimization.
No, listen, you make some really good points actually there, and thank you for breaking that down, because it really helps to explain things, especially around lab data. I think a lot of people don't look at that it's the way that it pulls these numbers, right? Because that's very important as something to take into consideration when you're thinking about these scores and where they come from. Listen, it's meant to start a conversation. It's not an end-all, be-all. We saw the same things on the SEO side of the house. Oftentimes you will get these, high-level SEO audits where someone runs a scan across a website and then sends it off to the SEO team, and it creates a lot of scare in people at times, because it just looks at the surface level, high-level stuff without really digging into why something happened or what it is. It's meant to do just that. It's meant to disrupt and bring attention often to things that don't need attention. But often, as you said, each individual case or each individual website is very different, and they should be approached differently. It's because there's other factors involved, right? And the key is trying to find that balance between some of these things, right? Page speed as well as overall experience. So I want to ask then, what should DMOs really be aware of then, Amir? Really to keep their site performing at its absolute best. Again, having all of your technical knowledge, building hundreds of websites, and having an understanding of how this works. What should DMOs really be aware of to kind of keep their sites performing at their best? I want to ask you that.
So to keep your site performing at its best, the primary thing that you need to kind of like focus on is leverage the development resources that are available to you, wherever they may be. In our case, you're a Simple View client, you have a support team, maybe you have a CRO, a contract. Focus, what are your KPIs? What is actually truly important to you? Right? And have those measured, have those tested. Reach out to the support team. What can be done? What can be optimized? Where are you going to get the most bang for your buck? And keep in mind that, that doesn't necessarily translate to score. Like we talked about, CLS is the thing that people really feel, but is not going to move the needle in terms of score. So it's really kind of evaluating what is the experience you want your visitors to have. What do you care about measuring and optimizing for those?
Yeah, no, really, really good points. I agree with you on that. Is really leverage the team that's there. I talked about in the beginning of having this offensive and defensive approach. So having, leveraging that support team, leveraging the UX and CRO team to help on the testing side to make sure the overall page experience is good. So you're balancing the intentions of what you're trying to accomplish with the visitor's overall experience. And then as always, leverage your SEO team, leverage your content team. These things are all working in unison to try to create a better overall user experience, which then typically translates rather into more desired actions being completed on your website, whether that's a booking or a lead or more time on site or better engagement, whatever it may be. But leverage those resources that you have available. So yeah, really good stuff there, Amir. I think it's nice to get more of a technical perspective of really separating the stuff, because there's a lot of noise. As there's a lot of noise in the space right now around third-party cookies and things that are happening on that end of the spectrum. There's also a lot of noise around page speed and performance surrounding this page experience update that Google's coming out with. Again, looks like that's been pushed back to mid-June, and it'll be a staggered approach. But keep in mind, folks, it is one of many factors that go into rankings. And we'll just have to see how things play out. But know that our team, both from a technical standpoint, defensively, and from an offensive standpoint on the front end with SEO, is all over this stuff. And we continue to be. So Amir, thank you for coming on and sharing some of this. Again, I know we talked about maybe this being, I think, a webinar in the future. I think it will be as things start to play out a little bit more. There's so many great insights that you and the team have to share. So thank you for taking time out of your schedule to join us.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. And thanks for tuning in each and every week. If you're not subscribed, please do so now. We're also available on Spotify and iTunes through podcast. If you'd like to consume us that way, please make sure you like and subscribe, as it really helps us out with the algorithm. So thanks for tuning in, everyone. We'll see you next time. Have a great day.